Good morning, everyone. Right, my name's Gaz, as Dan said, and yeah, for those of you that have been here before, I'm normally stood behind a guitar, which makes me infinitely more comfortable, if I'm honest. So this is a first for me. I think Dan approached me about a few months ago and says, "Would you ever fancy preaching?" And I think my initial response was no. And then Dan says, "Well, what about if you were to teach on worship?" And I think he knew that I couldn't really turn that down. So I just hope Dan's not on the end of the phone when I try and cancel my next phone contract. Yeah, my name's Gaz. I spend my life. I work as a graphic designer for a magazine called S40 at the moment, which some of you might have heard of. I'm also just finished my second year studying theology up at Cliff College. Prior to all that, I worked for a few years at St Thomas's down the road in Chesterfield, kind of overseeing the musical worship teams and youth stuff. But if you were to cut me open down the middle, worship, and particularly kind of worship through music, is kind of where my heart lies. Hence, Dan knew he'd cornered me. No, but it is a privilege to stand here. Worship, what is worship? It's a massive question, and it's one that I'm not going to answer fully in any way this morning, so I'm not going to try to. So I want to speak on a few aspects of worship. So first of all, I want to read a passage from Psalm 96. Just get that. Psalms are a great place to come for inspiration, actually. It's a book of worship songs and laments and prayers, and it's just an amazing place to find worship to God. So here we go, Psalm 96. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, praise his name. Proclaim his salvation day after day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous deeds among the peoples. For great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. He's to be feared above all gods, for all gods of the nations are idols. But the Lord made the heavens. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and glory are in his sanctuary. Ascribe to the Lord, O families of nations. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due to his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. Tremble before him, all the earth. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. The world is firmly established, it cannot be moved. He will judge the peoples with equity. Let the heavens rejoice, let the earth be glad. Let the sea resound and all that is within it. Let the fields be jubilant and everything in them. Then all the trees of the forest will sing for joy. They will sing before the Lord, for he comes. He comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples in his truth. I think that paints just such a great picture of how we should come to our worship to God. I want to pick a few things out of that. The first of those is that worship is our response to God. There's a couple of quotes. Oh, here we go. It's before me. Worship is our response, both personal and corporate, to God for who he is, what he has done, expressed in and by the things we say and the way we live. Okay, and there's another one. Worship is the believer's response to all they are, mind, emotions, will, body, to what God says and does. Now, these are great, but they're very Christian. What I think is important to realise to start with is worship is not something that is unique to the church. It never has been. As human beings, we are designed to worship. And here it speaks about these false gods. It's very rare nowadays that we actually speak about false gods and idols and stuff. But it is such a vital thing to realise that people outside the church, non-believers, are no less worshippers than we are. And if you don't feel like you're worshipping God, then I would say that you're probably worshipping something. I think I would go as far as saying that every human being is. Throughout the Bible, there's dozens of gods that are mentioned, of false gods. There's I'll read a few out for you. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know how to pronounce most of these, but here we go. Adramelech, the sun god; Amon, the sun god; Anamelech, the moon goddess; Asherah, the fertility god; Ashima, Ashtoreth, Baal, Beelzebub; Shamosh, Dawan. There's one called Diana, apparently. I don't know if the royal family read that before, but probably not. Gad, Kalwan. The list goes on. There's all these gods that we don't hear about nowadays. You know, when was the last time you spoke to someone at work that says, "Oh, I'm just off to worship Baal this weekend"? You know, it doesn't happen. But that doesn't mean that people worship idols any less. You know, that they've just been substituted for things subtler, and in a way, things that actually maybe make it more difficult for us to get across the idea of worshipping God, because people don't recognise that they spend their lives in worship to things. It's going to be different people. Is it cars? Is it money? Is it sex? Is it your iPhone? Is it Facebook? Is it status, fame, or fashion? They're all things that people worship, including ourselves. I don't think we're exempt from this, which I'm going to mention in a bit. So I found a quote by a chap called Harold Best, which isn't the Labour chap who I found when I Googled him. He's a theologian. But worship is the sign that in giving myself completely to someone or something, I want to be mastered by it. So worship is a sign that in giving myself completely to someone or something, I want to be mastered by it. That is what we do when we worship. We give ourselves so much to something that we say, I want that to rule my life. So if we go back to those other quotes, is that what we're doing? Do we want Jesus to rule our lives? When you think about the things that other people worship, all the things that we worship of that list I've just read out, that is quite an uncomfortable thought, I think. You know, that worship is the sign in giving myself completely to someone or something, I want to be mastered by it. You're saying with what you do, what you want to be mastered by. When I was trying to prepare for this, I think God put two words in my mind, and that was undivided worship. And it took me a while to kind of mull it over, and it hadn't really been something I thought about before. But it kind of made me realise that our challenge isn't how we worship or what we do to worship, but the challenge is who we worship. And actually, God is all deserving of our undivided worship. Another word it put in my mind was continuous worship, because worship isn't something that we do that God, nowhere in Psalms does it say, does David talk about worshipping God for 2 hours on a Sunday. It's his life. He responds to the things he sees, and actually that means a continuous, everyday choice in making it. It's 1 Corinthians 6 says this, "Or do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own, for you were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body." Worship's not about trying too hard to impress God with the things that we might think impress other people. Of course, we want to give God the best, which is why painters paint extravagant paintings and builders build architecture that makes us just stand in awe. But the essence of worship is that God deserves our full, everyday attention, from the first breath in the morning to the last breath at night. You might be kind of thinking, okay, that's great. That's great, but I'm not inspired to worship. How do you do that every day? And I think from what I get from a lot of these psalms is that that David and the whole scriptures, people are looking for God, and the key is we've got to look for God in everything. There's a well-known worship leader, Matt Redman, who sing a few of his songs. He says this: "When we face up to the glory of God, we find ourselves face down." I think that is the essence of worship. I had the privilege last year, we went to Swaziland with Samaritan's Purse, with Katie, Sam and a few others, and we visited various projects, and I don't know if you've ever been on any of these mission trips, but you often end up, you're generally in a minibus, and you get paraded around. They want to kind of show off as many of their communities and projects as possible. So you've often had a couple of hours drive on a pretty bad road, and whatever. And so I remember we arrived in this one place, and you kind of feeling a bit grotty, to be honest. You're kind of like, you're just waking up. And I always get a bit nervous actually when we arrive, because I kind of always think, do they really want us to be here? They're living their lives here. Do they really want outsiders to come in and see what they're doing or whatever? And so anyway, so we arrived at this one place, and we got out. We'd gone on this particular occasion to build a mud hut for a lady who, well, I say to help build. We definitely didn't build it, but to build this little mud hut for which would be this lady's house. Her house was destroyed in the storm, and we got out with a bit of fear, a bit, feeling a bit, a bit nervous, and we stood around rather awkwardly in this circle, kind of waiting to be introduced, really. And then this chap just started singing. And he started singing and worshipping, and he started moving, and we all kind of tried to join in, again, a bit awkwardly. It wasn't, it didn't sound like the angels in heaven, I'm not going to lie. But what I took away from that is that his first response was not to thank us for going there. His response was to thank God that we'd gone there. And sometimes we're so intent on looking for things on earth, we're looking to thank each other, we're looking for thanks ourselves, that actually we forget to thank God first. The Bible is full of times where people see something of God's glory and respond. I want to read a bit of a passage from Revelation, actually. Don't worry, Dan, it's not... don't worry. I had a joke with Dan earlier, but no, I'll tell you after. I don't want to give away the next part. This is Revelation 1. This is John speaking. I turned around to see the voice that was speaking to me. And when I turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And among the lampstands was someone like the Son of Man, dressed in a robe reaching around his chest. His head and hair were white like wool and white as snow. His eyes were blazing like fire. His feet were like bronze glowing in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of rushing waters. In his right hand he held 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp double-edged sword. His face was like the sun, shining in all its brilliance. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. Then he placed his right hand on me and said, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forever and ever." John faced up to the glory of God and fell face down. The second thing that I think is essential as Christians that goes on from this is that we never lose the wonder of God. When we speak about these other idols like cars and money or whatever, the reason that people worship them, the reason that we worship them, is because we don't lose the wonder, because we spend our lives trying to find out more. If you're I don't know, if you like gadgets or whatever, like phones or whatever, you're waiting to see the next phone that comes out. You've got that expectation, that wonder. But how greater should the wonder be of God? And it's something that it's easy to do on a Sunday morning, or it's easy to do when you go to a big festival or something. But it's not something that's easy to do on a Tuesday afternoon when you sat in work having a bit of a rough day. But it's something that it's up to us to look for God. It's up to us to ensure that we don't lose that wonder. And in life nowadays, nothing has wonder to it. Does it? Look at this. If I press 11 buttons on this, I can ring anyone the other side of the world. I could ring someone in Fiji or Australia with this, and the buttons I'm pressing aren't even there. It's a glass screen. That's how much we have lost the wonder of the world. When you go visiting a great landmark, whatever, or a great landscape, do you stand there in awe at God's creation? I'll tell you what some people do. Yeah, go for the next one. This is what we do, isn't it? We turn our backs from it and we take a selfie because we're more important than God's glory. Okay, I know that's not a natural thing, you know what I mean? You get the picture. Ourselves have become far more important than anything like this. So I challenge you, next time you go to Kerber Edge or you go somewhere like that, keep your phone in your pocket and praise God for what he's created. So I want to finish. Well, not quite yet, but sorry about that. Yeah. I don't want to fill you with the false sense of hope, do I? But no. I want to finish. Sometimes it's difficult to grasp the greatness of God. So I do want to finish with a bit of an illustration, if that's okay with you. I've got a prop. I thought I'd keep in theme with Wimbledon this week, even though Andy Murray's gone out. It is still on today. This is a tennis ball. I want you to imagine that the Earth is the size of this tennis ball. Okay? So just at the face of this, I don't know what animal that is actually, but anyway, just at the face of that animal is us. Okay? Can you imagine that? Okay. I want a couple of volunteers. The white siblings, come on. Beth, can you stand on that red tape there? Joe, do you want to come and stand over here? That red tape. If the Earth is a tennis ball... Now, I should say this before. I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination. These might not be 100% accurate to scale, but I've done my best. I've done some good maths here, I think. If the Earth is a tennis ball, this is the size of the sun. And when I say the size of the sun, that's the radius of the sun. That's quite difficult to imagine, isn't it? That's huge. That's nothing. Actually, just while we're here, if anyone doesn't like science but likes sports, just step back a bit, Joe. Go on that one there. That's the world record for the long jump. Seriously, that's quite that in itself. Yeah. Dan could do that before his knees went bad. Actually, right. Cool. Thanks, guys. You want to sit down? Okay, that's the size of the sun. Now that's impressive. Okay, but then we think about how far the sun is away from us, and to use that, I thought we'd use Britain's favourite building. Speaking of architecture, here we go, the Gherkin. If the Earth is a tennis ball, and you were to just put it in the middle of two paving slabs at the bottom of the Gherkin, it would take you 4 gherkins to reach the sun. If the Earth is a tennis ball. Okay. Now you'll be very well aware that the sun is by no means the biggest star in the planet. There's a star that I've learnt about this week actually called Betelgeuse. I don't know if that pronunciation is right, but it can't be as bad as my ones earlier of the gods. Just make sure I get my figures right here. Betelgeuse is a star 642.5 light years away. If the Earth was a tennis ball, that would be 23,309,257 miles away. Or if you wanted to go on holiday, pack up your bags to go to Betelgeuse for the 6-week holidays, you would travel around the Earth. If the Earth was a tennis ball, you would travel around the real size Earth 936 times, or go from Chesterfield to London 155,000 times. Betelgeuse is 28 gherkins if the Earth is a tennis ball. You couldn't even put with a biro that tennis ball on the bottom of that bottom gherkin. That's nothing though. This number here. Is anyone good at maths? Does anyone know what that number is? Because I don't know what that number is. No, it's a very big number. And they didn't teach us that in maths. We didn't go that far. That is the amount of times the Earth can fit into Betelgeuse. That is a lot of times. If the Earth were a tennis ball, that's enough time. That's enough to fill centre court at Wimbledon to the brim with tennis balls of the Earth 7 million times. And we're right there. Betelgeuse is the 9th biggest star that's been found. There are 8 stars bigger than Betelgeuse. The biggest is called the Canis Majoris, something like that, which is 81 gherkins. Now, there is some gherkins on the screen there, but you can't see them because they're that small. Never lose the wonder. Do you know what, though? Any scientist in here will tell you that at some point, Betelgeuse and all these other stars are going to explode. It's not going to be for a while, I hope, and we won't even find out about it until millions and millions of years down the line. But these planets that are as awesome as that are just as fleeting and just as momentary as you and I. It might be unimaginable and indescribable, but it bears no greatness compared to our God. And if this isn't enough, when we lay down before our God in awe, we worship a God that responds to us. John sees this incredible visual in Revelation. He says, "When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead." John faced up to the glory of God and fell face down. You know, in that moment, that's enough. John's seen everything. John's seen the glory of Jesus. John's seen more than we could ever imagine. That is enough. Yet Jesus puts his hand on him and says, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last, the living one. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forever and ever." When we truly recognize God's greatness and lay our lives before him, he responds and he'll say to us, "Do not be afraid, for I am with you from beginning to end." This is why we worship. This is why we sing, and particularly this is why we spend so much time in singing, because we recognize that it's about seeing God's glory, it's about responding to God's glory, but it's about giving God time to speak to us, because we know that we're in the presence of such an unbelievable, amazing God.